At 11:47 p.m. on March 14, 1944, Private Eric Anderson crouched in frozen Norwegian mud, gripping a hand-forged throwing axe, while 9 German sentries patrolled the perimeter of Greeny detention camp. The SS guards had laughed when they confiscated his grandfather's Viking axe during his capture 3 weeks earlier. They mounted it on the commandant's office wall as a curiosity. In the next 40 minutes, Anderson would retrieve that axe, kill those 9 guards without firing a single shot, and lead 17 Norwegian resistance fighters to freedom across 12 miles of enemy territory. The Germans never understood what hit them until they found the bodies. Anderson was born in 1921 in Rjukan, a working-class town in Telemark, where his father worked the aluminum factories and his grandfather ran a small forge. The old man, Gunnar Anderson, was one of the last traditional blacksmiths in Norway who still made tools by hand. Every summer from age 8, Eric spent months in that forge, learning to shape metal and throw axes at targets. It was a dying skill, something tourists paid to watch, but Gunnar took it seriously. He'd make Eric practice for hours, throwing at marked circles on pine logs from 10 feet, then 20, then 30. The boy's shoulders burned, his palms blistered, but by age 16, Eric could sink a hand axe into a 6-inch target from 40 feet, 9 times out of 10. The throwing technique wasn't just about strength. Gunnar taught him to read distance, to adjust for wind, to calculate rotation. 1 1/4 spins for 15 feet. 2 full rotations for 25. At 40 feet, the axe completed 3 spins before the blade struck. Eric learned to feel the weight distribution, to release at the exact moment when the handle angle matched the target distance. His grandfather forged him a special throwing axe when Eric turned 18, lighter than a battle axe, perfectly balanced, with a narrow beard and a razor-sharp bit. The handle was Norwegian ash, the head was high-carbon steel, and the whole thing weighed exactly 2.5 pounds. Eric never thought the skill mattered. He worked the docks in Rjukan after finishing school, loading aluminum onto rail cars, dreaming of nothing more complicated than a fishing boat and a small house. When Germany invaded Norway in April 1940, he was 19 years old. He watched Wehrmacht troops march through his town, requisition the factories, turn Norwegian workers into laborers for the Reich. He joined the resistance in 1941, running messages at first, then weapons, then helping RAF pilots escape to Sweden. The Gestapo arrested him in February 1944 during a weapons drop that went wrong. Someone had talked. They took 12 resistance fighters that night, including Eric's childhood friend, Lars Bergman. The Germans transported them to Greeny, a detention camp 8 miles north of Oslo. It wasn't a death camp, but prisoners died there regularly from cold, disease, and occasional executions. The SS guards processed Eric on arrival, cataloging his possessions. When they found the throwing axe wrapped in his pack, they didn't understand what it was. The interrogating officer, Hauptsturmführer Klaus Richter, examined it with curiosity. Eric told him it was his grandfather's. Richter laughed, called it a Viking toy, and hung it on his office wall next to a Norwegian flag he'd captured. Eric said nothing. He memorized the layout of the building, the distance from the window to the wall, the height of the mount. Greeny held approximately 300 prisoners in March 1944. The compound consisted of wooden barracks surrounded by double barbed wire fences, guard towers at each corner, and a main administrative building where the commandant and senior officers worked. The guards rotated in 3 shifts. Night shift was smallest, usually 12 men covering the entire perimeter. They walked predictable patterns, checking the wire every 30 minutes, smoking cigarettes near the gate. staying close to the braziers when the temperature dropped below freezing. Eric watched them for 3 weeks, memorizing every detail. The resistance fighters in Greenie knew about a planned mass execution. The Gestapo had evidence linking 17 prisoners to sabotage operations against the Norsk hydro plant, the heavy water facility that supplied Germany's atomic research program. Oslo headquarters ordered the executions for March 15th at dawn. The men would be taken out in trucks, shot in the forest, buried in unmarked graves. Lars was on the list. So was Eric. They had maybe 36 hours. Escape from Greenie was considered impossible. The fences were 10 feet high, the wire was double layered, and guards shot anyone who approached the perimeter after dark. Previous escape attempts had ended with bodies hanging from the wire as warnings. In February, 3 men tried cutting through the fence with smuggled tools. Guards caught them halfway through, beat them unconscious, then shot them in the yard the next morning. Every prisoner watched. The message was clear, but Eric had noticed something the others hadn't. The guard tower on the northwest corner had a blind spot where the administrative building blocked the searchlight. A gap of maybe 40 feet, completely dark between 11:30 p.m. and midnight when the guards changed positions. On March 13th, Eric told 5 other prisoners about his plan. They met in the latrine during evening count, speaking in whispers while guards patrolled outside. He explained about the blind spot, about the guard patterns, about the 30-minute window when the northwest section was vulnerable. One man, a former Oslo police officer, named Halvard Nielsen, shook his head. The wire was too thick to cut quickly. The guards would hear them. Even if they got through the fence, they'd never make it past the outer perimeter. There were too many patrols, too many dogs, too much open ground. Eric told them about the axe, about Richter's office, about what he could do if he got inside that building. Halvard stared at him. "You're talking about killing 9 guards with a throwing axe." "Silently," Eric said, "one at a time, before they can raise the alarm." "That's insane." "It's the only chance." The men looked at each other. Lars, who'd known Eric since childhood, spoke carefully. "Can you actually do what you're describing? Throw an axe 50 feet and kill a man?" "I've done it from 40 feet. 50 is harder, but possible if I adjust for the extra rotation." "Done it?" Another prisoner, a farmer named Olson, leaned forward. "You've killed men with thrown axes?" "Targets. Pine logs. Same principle." Nobody spoke for 20 seconds. Finally, Halvard nodded slowly. "If you can get to that axe, if you can take down even half the guards, the rest of us can rush the gate. We'd have weapons, element of surprise." "How do you get into Richter's office?" Lars asked. Eric had thought about nothing else for 3 weeks. The administrative building has a coal chute, delivery entrance on the north side. Guards don't watch it because it's inside the wire, and prisoners never go near the building. I can slip in during the 11 p.m. count confusion, move through the basement, climb to the second floor. Richter's office is southeast corner. I saw them hang the axe there. And then I kill every guard I can see before someone raises the alarm. They agreed to attempt it on March 14th. The execution trucks would arrive at dawn on the 15th. It was escape that night, or die the next morning. Eric spent March 14th memorizing guard positions during every count, every meal distribution, every patrol change. He noted which guards smoked, which ones talked to each other, which ones stayed isolated. He calculated throwing distances from Richter's window to each patrol point. The closest guard station was 42 feet. The farthest was 68 feet. He'd never thrown accurately past 50 feet, but he'd have to try. At 10:45 p.m. on March 14th, the temperature was 28 degrees Fahrenheit. Eric wore his thinnest clothes, nothing that would snag or rustle. He'd tied strips of torn blanket around his boots to muffle footsteps. During the evening count, he positioned himself near the latrine building, the structure closest to the administrative block. When guards ordered prisoners back to barracks at 11:00 p.m., Eric slipped behind the latrine, pressed himself flat against the wall, and waited. Searchlights swept the yard. Voices shouted in German. Barracks doors slammed shut. Then silence. He moved at 11:12 p.m. The blind spot opened up as the Northwest Tower guard turned to light a cigarette. Eric crossed 40 feet of open ground in 18 seconds, staying low, making no sound. The coal chute was exactly where he remembered, a wooden door set into the building's foundation. He lifted it slowly, letting hinges creak naturally rather than forcing them quiet. The sound matched the wind. He slipped inside, closed the door, and descended into complete darkness. The basement smelled like coal dust and mildew. Eric felt his way forward, hands on stone walls, counting steps. 12 steps to the east wall. Turn left. 20 steps to the stairwell. The administrative building was 2 stories, wooden construction above a stone foundation. Stairs creaked. He waited after each sound, listening for movement above. Nothing. The guards didn't patrol inside at night. Why would they? Prisoners couldn't reach the building. He reached the second floor at 11:28 p.m. Richter's office was the third door on the right. Eric tested the handle. Locked. He'd expected that. He removed a piece of wire he'd straightened from a bunk spring, worked it into the lock mechanism. His hands were steady. He'd picked locks before during resistance operations. This one was German-made, solid, but not complicated. The cylinder turned after 90 seconds of pressure. The door opened. Richter's office was dark except for moonlight through the window. Eric saw the axe immediately, mounted on the wall between 2 Wehrmacht recruitment posters. His grandfather's work, the handle worn smooth from years of practice, the blade still sharp despite the Germans' neglect. He lifted it off the mount, felt the familiar weight, tested the balance. Perfect. Exactly as he remembered. He moved to the window and looked out at the compound. 9 guards were visible, 3 smoking near the main gate, 2 walking the eastern fence, 1 in the northwest tower, 1 checking the wire near the latrine, 2 more patrolling the gap between inner and outer perimeter. All of them carried rifles. Most had pistols holstered. They walked casually, no urgency, no concern. Why would they worry? The prisoners were locked in barracks, half-starved, unarmed. Eric opened the window slowly. Cold air rushed in. He evaluated the distances. Nearest guard was 42 feet away, standing near the gate, rifle slung over his shoulder. Second nearest was 45 feet, walking the fence. Tower guard was 53 feet. The 2 outer perimeter guards were 60-plus feet, maybe too far. He'd have to take the close ones first, move fast, hope surprise bought him enough time. He gripped the axe, felt for the balance point, visualized the throw. 42 feet meant just over 2 full rotations. Release angle had to be precise. The guard near the gate turned sideways, presenting his profile. Eric drew back, stepped into the throw exactly as his grandfather taught him. The axe left his hand with a whisper of displaced air. 2 1/4 rotations. The blade struck the guard's temple at 42 feet, sinking 3 inches into his skull. The man dropped without a sound, crumpling forward onto the frozen ground. His rifle clattered against stone. Too loud. Eric froze. The second guard, 45 feet away, turned toward the noise. Eric was already moving. He sprinted down the stairs, out through the coal chute, across the yard to where the first guard lay. Blood pooled around the man's head, steaming in the cold. Eric retrieved the axe with one hard pull, grabbed the guard's rifle, checked the magazine. 8 rounds. He turned as the second guard came around the corner of the administrative building, saw the body, started to raise his weapon. The axe spun through the air at 45 feet. This time, it took 2.5 rotations, struck the guard in the chest just below the sternum, drove through his rib cage into his heart. He made a gasping sound, tried to shout, couldn't get air. He fell backward, hitting the ground hard. Eric reached him in 5 seconds, pulled the axe free, took the man's rifle and ammunition. 2 down. 7 guards remaining. No alarm yet. But the tower guard had noticed the movement, was turning his searchlight toward the administrative building. Eric dropped flat as light swept over him, playing dead next to the second guard's body. The searchlight paused, moved on. The tower guard called out in German. No response. He called again, louder this time. Eric rolled behind the corner of the building as the searchlight returned. He heard the tower guard working the bolt on his rifle, heard him shouting for the gate guards. 3 guards at the gates started moving, bringing their rifles up, spreading out to investigate. Eric had maybe 20 seconds before they found the bodies and raised the full alarm. He stepped out from cover with a stolen rifle, fired twice. 1 gate guard went down. Another dove behind the guard shack. The third started running toward the barracks, shouting. Eric tracked him, fired, missed. The guard reached the barracks, started hammering on the door, yelling for reinforcements. The tower guard opened fire. Bullets struck the ground near Eric's feet, kicked up frozen dirt. Eric ran for the fence, threw himself behind a drainage ditch, rolled to his knees with the axe in hand. The tower guard was 53 feet away, elevated 15 feet in his position. Difficult angle, hard throw. Eric stood, drew back, released. The axe spun 3 full rotations, rising, angling up. It struck the guard's shoulder instead of his head, buried in muscle and bone. Not a kill shot. The guard screamed, dropped his rifle, clutched at the axe handle. Eric grabbed the second stolen rifle, aimed, fired 4 rounds. 2 hit. The guard fell backward in the tower, crashed through the wooden railing, landed on the ground with a sound like breaking branches. Eric ran to him, retrieved the axe from his shoulder, finished him with a quick strike. 4 guards dead, 5 remaining. The 2 outer perimeter guards were running toward the compound, attracted by the gunfire. The guard who'd reached the barracks was still shouting, trying to organize a response. The remaining gate guard was behind cover, firing blindly. Eric counted rounds. The gate guard had fired 6 times, probably had 4 rounds left. Perimeter guards were 60 feet out, closing fast. Eric made a decision. He sprinted toward the main gate, using the guard shack for cover. The gate guard leaned out to fire, exposed his head. Eric threw the axe from 30 feet. Perfect rotation. The blade split the man's skull vertically, drove down through his brain. He died instantly. Eric reached him, pulled the axe free, grabbed ammunition from his belt. The 2 perimeter guards were 40 feet away now, firing as they ran. Bullets whined past Eric's head. He dropped behind the guard shack, loaded fresh magazines into both rifles, waited. The guards advanced recklessly, thinking they had him pinned. When they were 30 feet away, Eric stepped out and fired both rifles simultaneously. One guard took 3 rounds in the chest. The other caught 2 in the stomach, went down screaming. Eric approached the stomach-shot guard, who was crawling toward his weapon. The man looked young, maybe 20, terrified. He begged in German. Eric didn't understand the words, but he understood the meaning. He raised the axe. The guard closed his eyes. Eric struck once. The screaming stopped. 6 guards dead, 3 remaining. The barracks guard was still shouting, but he'd stopped hammering. He'd realized what was happening, that his friends were dying, that someone was killing them methodically. Eric heard him running, boots pounding on frozen ground, heading toward the commandant's quarters to raise the full alarm. Eric chased him. The guard had a 40-yard head start, but Eric was faster, driven by urgency and 3 weeks of hunger-fueled rage. He closed the distance to 30 yards, then 20. The guard glanced back, saw Eric gaining, tried to run faster. His boots slipped on ice. He fell, scrambled up, lost 3 seconds. Eric threw at 25 feet. The axe rotated once, struck the guard between the shoulder blades, severed his spine. He went down face first, slid across the ice, stopped moving. Eric retrieved the axe, breathing hard now, chest burning. 7 dead. 2 guards remaining, probably inside the commandant's quarters, probably already raising the alarm by telephone. He ran to the building, kicked open the door. 2 guards inside, both scrambling for weapons. One grabbed a pistol from his belt. Eric threw from 15 feet, close range, 1 rotation. The axe hit him in the throat, crushed his windpipe, pinned him to the wall. The last guard had a rifle, brought it up, aimed at Eric's chest. Eric dove left as the rifle fired. The bullet passed through the space where he'd been standing, punched through the wall. Eric rolled, came up with one of the stolen rifles, fired 3 times. All 3 rounds hit center mass. The guard staggered, fell, didn't move. Silence. Eric stood alone in the commandant's quarters, surrounded by German corpses, holding his grandfather's axe. Blood dripped from the blade. His hands were shaking. The entire engagement had lasted 8 minutes from first throws to final shot. 9 guards dead. 0 alarms raised. The rest of the camp had no idea what just happened. He moved fast now, back to the barracks, breaking open doors, shouting in Norwegian. Prisoners poured out, confused, terrified, seeing the bodies scattered across the compound. Lars found him first, grabbed his shoulders. "What did you do?" "Exactly what I said I'd do. We have maybe 10 minutes before someone notices the guards are gone. Get everyone to the gate." 17 prisoners who were scheduled for execution gathered at the main gate. Eric broke open the weapons locker, distributed rifles and pistols. Most of the men had military experience, knew how to shoot. They formed a defensive line while Eric worked on the gate lock with wire picks. It opened after 2 minutes of fumbling. The gate swung wide. Freedom lay beyond. They ran into the Norwegian forest at 12:23 a.m. on March 15, 1944. The temperature had dropped to 25 degrees. None of them wore proper winter clothes. Most hadn't eaten a full meal in weeks. But they moved fast, driven by survival instinct. Eric led them northwest toward Swedish border, 12 miles through enemy territory. He carried 2 rifles, his axe, and 120 rounds of ammunition. The first 2 miles were easy. Dark forest, no roads, no patrols. But at 1:15 a.m. they heard dogs barking behind them. The Germans had discovered the bodies, sent tracking dogs and soldiers. Eric counted at least 20 men in the pursuit force, maybe more. The refugees couldn't outrun them. They had to hide or fight. Eric chose a defensive position at a frozen stream, a narrow crossing point where the Germans would have to funnel through. He positioned his 17 men in a semicircle, told them to aim low, conserve ammunition. The dogs reached them first, 3 German shepherds straining against leashes. The handlers were 15 feet behind, visible in the moonlight. Eric fired twice. Both handlers dropped. The dogs stopped, confused, then ran. German soldiers opened fire from the tree line. Bullets tore through branches above the refugees' heads. Eric's men returned fire, shooting at muzzle flashes. The firefight lasted 4 minutes. The Germans fell back after losing 5 men to accurate Norwegian shooting. They regrouped, tried to flank from the east. Eric repositioned his defense, kept them contained. At 2:30 a.m., the Germans withdrew completely, either out of ammunition or unwilling to take more casualties. Eric waited 20 minutes to be sure. Then they moved again, heading northwest, abandoning the stream crossing for deeper forest. 3 of the refugees were wounded, nothing serious, but they slowed the group. Lars helped carry a man named Peterson, who'd taken a bullet in the leg. Eric led from the front, checking for patrols, choosing the path. They reached a frozen lake at 4 a.m. Sweden was 6 miles beyond the far shore. The ice looked solid, but Eric wasn't sure. February had been warm. The surface might not hold their weight. He tested it with a boot, felt it flex but not crack. They'd have to risk it. Going around would add hours they didn't have. Dawn was coming at 6:30 a.m. The Germans would track them easily in daylight. They crossed in single file, spreading out their weight. The ice groaned but held. Halfway across, Eric heard cracking sounds. He told everyone to stop moving, to lie flat, to distribute weight. They waited 3 minutes while the ice settled. Then they continued slowly, carefully. Everyone made it across. Nobody fell through. The last 5 miles passed in a blur of exhaustion. Eric's legs burned. His feet were numb. He'd lost feeling in his fingers. Other men were worse off. Peterson, the leg-wounded refugee, was unconscious, being carried by 2 others. Olsen, the farmer, was coughing blood, likely pneumonia. They needed shelter, medical care, warmth. They crossed into Sweden at 7:42 a.m. on March 15, 1944. A Swedish border patrol found them 200 yards past the boundary markers. The Swedish soldiers lowered their weapons when they saw the condition of the refugees. One radioed for medical help. Another gave Eric water. Eric collapsed against a tree, finally allowing himself to stop. All 17 prisoners survived. Swedish authorities transported them to a hospital in Kiruna, treated their wounds and frostbite. Eric lost 3 toes to cold damage. Olsen developed full pneumonia, but recovered after 2 weeks. Peterson's leg wound healed without infection. They spent 6 weeks in Sweden before being transported to England to join Norwegian forces in exile. Eric's debriefing took place in London during April 1944. British intelligence officers didn't believe his initial account. 9 German guards killed with a throwing axe? Impossible. They questioned him repeatedly, looking for inconsistencies. Eric told the same story every time. The officers brought in the other 16 refugees. Every man confirmed Eric's account. The guards died exactly as Eric described. The evidence was undeniable. Norwegian intelligence filed an after-action report dated April 28, 1944. It documented the escape, the killings, the pursuit, the survival. The report noted that no previous escape from Grini had succeeded. It recommended Erik for Norway's highest military decoration, the War Cross with Sword. The award ceremony took place in London on June 3, 1944, 2 days before D-Day. King Haakon VII, Norway's exiled monarch, presented the medal personally. Erik stood at attention while the king pinned the cross to his uniform. The other 16 survivors attended. Several were crying. Erik never spoke about the mission after the war. He returned to Rjukan in 1945, found his father still working the aluminum plant, found his grandfather dead from illness during the occupation. The forge was abandoned, tools rusted, the old Viking techniques forgotten. Erik cleaned it out, sold the equipment, used the money to buy a small fishing boat. He spent the rest of his life on Norwegian waters, catching cod and mackerel, living alone in a cabin near the coast. The freed prisoners stayed in contact. Every March 15th, they gathered in Oslo, 17 men who shouldn't have survived. They'd drink and remember that frozen night when Erik Anderson killed 9 guards without raising an alarm. Lars Bergman became a teacher, told his students about the war, always mentioned Erik's name. Halvard Nilsen joined Oslo police again, eventually became chief of detectives. Peterson recovered from his leg wound, returned to farming. All of them remembered Erik as the man who saved their lives with his grandfather's axe. Erik died in 1983, at age 62, heart attack while working his fishing nets. His funeral in Rjukan drew a crowd of 200 people. 12 of the original 17 survivors attended, old men now, white-haired and bent. They buried him with his war cross and his grandfather's throwing axe. The priest spoke about courage and sacrifice. The survivors didn't speak. They didn't need to. They knew what Erik had done. German records captured after the war confirmed details of the Grini escape. 9 sentries killed on March 14, 1944. Method of death initially listed as unknown bladed weapon. Subsequent investigation determined thrown axe or hatchet. The Germans never understood how a prisoner acquired such a weapon or developed the skill to kill trained soldiers from 50 feet. They increased guard numbers at Grini, added searchlights, reinforced fences. But they couldn't stop prisoners from telling the story. Word spread through the camp, then through occupied Norway. The resistance used it for morale. One man with an axe had killed 9 Germans and freed 17 patriots. Modern military historians debate whether the feat was possible. Throwing axe experts note that 50 feet is near the maximum effective range for accuracy. Olympic axe throwers rarely exceed 40 feet in competition. But Erik wasn't competing. He was killing. The mechanics were sound. The physics worked. The witnesses confirmed it. And the German death reports documented 9 guards dead by bladed trauma in an 8-minute span. The story matters because it shows what individual courage can accomplish against impossible odds. Erik Anderson wasn't a professional soldier. He was a dock worker who learned a dying skill from his grandfather. He used that skill to save 17 lives and strike a blow against occupation. He never sought fame. He returned to humble work, lived simply, died quietly. But the men he saved never forgot him, and neither should we. If you found this story compelling, please like this video. Subscribe to stay connected with these untold histories. Leave a comment telling us where you're watching from. Thank you for keeping these stories alive.